seen the benefits of automation on top of traditional networking and now artificial intelligence on top of automation.
Welcome to the /podcast, where we lean into the future of IT by inviting fellow thought leaders, innovators, and problem solvers to slash through its complexity. I am your host, James Carman, and today we're talking to John Capobianco. I said that right? Capobianco.
Perfect, James. That's very well done. Yeah.
All right. John is the head of AI and developer relations at Itential, where he works at the cutting edge of AI and network automation. He's built his career across enterprise, government, and cloud environments, including time at Cisco and as a senior network architect for Canada's House of Commons. So he knows what it takes to run AI in high-stakes, mission-critical systems. These days, John is focused on helping organizations adopt AI in a way that's practical, secure, and trustworthy. He's also an author, educator, and the voice behind Automate Your Network, where he's helping shape what network engineering looks like in an AI-first world. That's a great intro. I love that bio. That's fantastic.
Well, I wish I could bring you around as my hype man, James, and send you out first with that little clip every time I appear somewhere. That was really good. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm going to try to stay humble. And before we even start with the artificial intelligence, let's make this optimistic. Let's make this hopeful. Let's make this encouraging and inspiring for people. I know that there's a lot of doom and gloom about AI, and I'm the last person you're going to hear that from. James, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you. And I want to hear a little bit about this, the working for the House of Commons. That seems like that's a high stakes gig right there. How was that?
It was a real, like you said, it was a high stakes gig. Maybe I was a little naive as to what I was getting myself into. It was a real opportunity for me to work with some exciting new technology, a whole green field, 45 buildings, 500 remote sites, 3 data centers, and to be part of some of the best talent Canada could put together at the time to work on a team to build, to architect, design, secure, deliver, operate, the whole thing. And after about 2.5 years of our team together, we quickly realized that we needed automation. And automation had started to become more popularized through tools like Ansible and even Python at the time, and some other frameworks and some other approaches. So we shifted our mode from purely manual CLI-only operations to automated operations. It was a journey. It wasn't overnight. It did take time. And not everything was automated, but you know what I mean? The good majority, the important pieces were automated for us. And then automation has led me to artificial intelligence. So for me, it was an evolutionary journey, not necessarily a revolutionary journey. One thing led to another. And I've seen the benefits of, automation on top of traditional networking and now artificial intelligence on top of automation.
I love that. Now, did you ever get to go into the House of Commons meetings and watch those? I see those videos online, and they're like, the Canadians have the most polite trash talk you've ever seen in your life. It's amazing, and they're great at that. So I love watching those videos. They're hilarious.
So I did have, my badge, and I was known as the network person. I just showed up with my badge, and they basically let me into any room in the House of Commons or in the Parliament because they assumed I was there on serious business. If I showed up, things were not good. It's sort of like the Grim Reaper appearing outside the Commons room because the network had issues and I had to be sent on site. But I really am proud of that. And there's a bit of a patriotism, in mixed into that pride to be able to say that I helped enable the Parliament. We didn't have, there was things like wireless, voice over IP, even more things like zoning and disaster recoveries and multi-data centers. We really actually, I know it's funny to think you go to the government to die in technology, right? Like you go to the public sector to get a good pension at the end of it. We actually were doing some really, really innovative things there.
Yeah, I think that whole mindset of the government kind of being able to be kind of lax with the modern, like, adversarial IT things going on around the world with, state actors and whatnot, I just don't think that's good enough anymore. I think you got to be on your A game now to work in the government. Anything related to that, that's where you got to put the aces in places for this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are big into automation. You automate all the things. Love that. That's kind of the DevOps movement. You mentioned that now you're kind of evolving, or you have already evolved into the AI space with automation. Tell us a little bit about kind of what did that journey. What does that journey even look like for somebody to kind of go from like the Ansible, that type of a world, into like letting robots take over everything we do?
Uh, right. Well, I uh I was very early, so let me start there. And I've been able to take this on in a chronological order, whereas some people maybe they're starting today and they're overwhelmed by
Mm,
the last 3 to 4 years of terminology and acronyms and techniques and blah blah blah. For me, when I got an API key, that's what thing changed. It was a fun little toy. Why is the sky blue? And I learned all kinds of amazing science as to why the sky was blue. I was chatting with it. It was natural language. It was fun. It was cute. But but it shouldn't stop there. So once I got my API key, I tied it into a network automation job. So let's take, and this is the actual example, James. For PyTest to test interfaces, you would run show interfaces, you would get parsed JSON back, and then start testing the key value pairs, interface drops, input drops, output drops, CRC errors. Is there a description on the port? There's probably 30 different things you could test on an
sure.
interface counter.
Yeah.
But how many different vendors are there? How many different types of interfaces amongst vendors are there? There's physical interfaces, there's virtual interfaces, uh, aggregated interfaces, layer three interfaces, on and on and on, right? So it becomes bespoke, it becomes brittle, it becomes handcrafted artisanal tests,
Hmm.
and it becomes 500 lines of Python, right?
With a bunch of if statements.
Which a bunch of if state, yes, and for loops and nested for loops, and you got it, James. So I took a step back and said, what if instead I took the blob of JSON that PyTest parsed back from show interfaces and looped through it and send each interface to the AI with a simple question: is this interface healthy?
Mm,
And it worked.
nice.
Yes, 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 no, and no, because it has CRC errors that are above a natural threshold. So not just like, no, it failed, right? But insight as to why it might be failing, or how the AI determined that it didn't pass. So that I felt like Gandalf, when he touches the One Ring and then he has to sit by the fire and contemplate what he has just experienced, with a pipe in his hand. And I'm
I
just
love it.
whispering things like LLM, precious,
I love it.
show interfaces. So anyway, after I come out of that, I started to do more. So, well, what if I could have it remediate the problem? Could it run more commands? Could it do this? Could it do that? So that's been my 3 or 4 year journey with AI, just continuously trying to push the boundaries and seeing where it fits,
Hmm.
and really just trying to figure it out, James. Like if I have become an expert, it's because I've put in the time and the effort over the past 4 years to become an expert. I don't really think of myself that way. I think of myself as just, I'm always in discovery mode. I like to share what I learn. And I think we're all in a mode of just figuring out what this new artificial intelligence world is going to look like.
Yeah, it's it's funny that the people who can call themselves experts and reliably put that moniker, like put that on LinkedIn or put it on their resume. That's got to be a very small crowd of people these days, because it's changing so much. Even if you're at it every day, all day long, trying to keep up. Nobody's an expert these days. Like you don't know everything. There's no way right now. It's crazy.
Right.
So, so early on. Okay, so you're using it early on. I know, like 3 or 4 years ago, what we were using. Well, first off, we were just using it as a nice little chat tool, as you said. Why is the sky blue? Right? Tell me some things, and it's a great learning tool. But early on, it wasn't great of like that kind of chain of thought, planning and putting aside a plan and saying, okay, now let me step through that plan. It wasn't great at that, but it was good at like kind of what I call it as like a linguistic adapter or a semantic bridge, as I've called it in the past, where you give it some natural language And instead of having to write Python code to figure out what does this natural language do or whatever, it can figure out and give you semantics and meaning of that text. It's really good at that sort of thing. So how did you, with the limitations early on, with kind of it just being really good at that semantic aspect, were you running into like, or did you ever get to the point where you were running into limitations like, oh, this thing just can't do planning, or it's not smart enough yet. I'm just held back. Did you experience that at all?
Absolutely. So for me in particular, it was I don't know. There's a model called a Yang model in networking, which is REST API endpoints and things of that nature, and it was happily just spitting a totally incorrect URL at me. Could I get the endpoint for this Yang endpoint, and then let's call the endpoint and get some data? And it would fail, and I'd look at the logs, and it was just some made up URL. Like it's not real. It's just, and it was confident, like, whoa, it's your problem. Like, no, that's the right URL. Like you're doing something wrong. So you sort of start to doubt yourself. And I'm going, well, my expertise in Yang tells me that that is not the URL for interfaces, right? And it's just keeps trying to crank away at that one URL. So then, but James, I saw this as an opportunity maybe to learn. And at the time it was, how could we add external calls from the LLM? So retrieval augmented generation became a big part of my career for, probably 2 years. Even to this day, I still use RAG occasionally for certain solutions. Um, and back to that weird, back to how your brain works. So once I figured out that I could put JSON into a vector store and effectively do semantic lookups against the vector store, I started to put network data into the vector store and ask things like, what's my default route? And it would answer correctly. And I thought that was really interesting to be able to provide an LLM access to external data, right, at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It also helped us overcome the very small context window at the time. It wasn't millions of tokens. It was 4096 or very small windows. So you had to find a way and be a creative to jam things into that small context window. And RAG was very good at that. Um, so then in the night, I sit up in bed and I go, hang on, I can use T-Shark to convert a PCAP file, a Wireshark packet capture, into JSON. Then I could put that JSON in a vector store, effectively allowing me to talk to packets. So that I wrote that as an open source tool, and I did some work when I was at Selector AI, an open source packet copilot, where you can literally upload a PCAP file and ask it the source destination IP, where the highest latency is, if it's malicious. So RAG become really very fun and cool. It's I don't know if we don't talk about or hear much about it because it just is sort of maybe it had its day, and we've moved into say model context protocol now. And admittedly, I do so much more MCP now than I'm doing RAG, but I still think there might be a place for RAG.
Yeah, I think RAG is still valid in concept. I think some of the MCP stuff is still, the idea was bring me and find me relevant context that I can have the LLM help me reason about. That's what the idea of RAG was. You're doing that with tools now in MCP, so I don't think it's
Right,
gone.
right.
It's just it's got a new face to it. Well, so I do want to hear about this, and it might be a little bit of a deep dive from a technical aspect. But like you said, I'm taking the JSON of these PCAP files, and I'm putting that into a vector store. How did you find an embedding? So embeddings really are about like bringing meaning to things and creating vectors, whereas their cosine similarity, if there's a small cosine similarity or they're very close to one another in the multidimensional space, they're talking about the same thing, but they're really oriented towards words and, meanings and of words, not just ports and those sort of things. So
Right, right,
how
right.
did you get the embeddings to put it in the vector store? What did that process look like?
Well, I have to give a huge amount of credit to the LangChain team and
Hmm.
LangChain and LangGraph.
Yeah.
And they have laid out a nice 6-step process to do RAG. So you have your source, in my case is JSON, which means you need a JSON loader. And then from the loader, you chunk up the data. So let's say you show interfaces. I don't want the full blob of JSON, 38 or 48 interfaces in one big chunk. I want per interface values. So now it's funny, James, this used to be manual and sort of like guesswork where I'd say, okay, chunk every 500 characters. or chunk every comma or exclamation mark. Now, listeners are probably saying, that seems flawed. Like, that doesn't seem very scientific, right? So now we actually use the LLM, an embeddings model, to do the chunking for us. And that was really neat in that it would actually chunk it on correctly every time, deterministically, because we're using a model to do the splitting.
Hmm.
And then we use an embeddings model. And there's cloud models for embeddings, and they're very inexpensive, James. So to turn JSON into floating point numbers. So these embeddings, everyone that we're talking about, they have a few different names. They sometimes are called vectors because they go into a vector store and because they're 16-bit floating point numbers. But
Hmm.
that's all it is. It's an array of 16-bit floating point numbers that is derived from those blobs of JSON. So the routes or the ports or whatever it is we're describing in the networking term. Um, so then we have to store it in a vector store, and I've used a few. I like ChromaDB because it's offline and it's free and it's private and it's local. I think it's sort of become the de facto vector store as well as is ChromaDB. But there's Weaviate and Pinecone and Elastic, and Elastic is fun because you get to visualize things in Kibana. So if anyone out there is already an Elastic shop and you want to get into RAG, you can use your Elastic backends to store these vectors. It's pretty cool.
Hmm.
And then and finally we get the LLM involved. So that's funny. There's 5 out of the 6 processes in RAG are using models, embeddings models, but they're not using a large language model. Finally, the large language model can then do the semantic lookup when I say, what's my default route? Well, if I don't have a vector store, it's going to hallucinate, or at best, it'll say, here's how to find a default route on a Cisco router. Here's the commands you can use, right? But without the context, how is it supposed to know my default route?
Right.
Well,
Right.
now I can do a semantic lookup, actually check the JSON, the vectors, and say, oh, your default route is this IP using this interface and this next hop. And that is pretty cool to be able to talk to your routing table, let's say, right?
Yeah. I always tell people on the embeddings thing to kind of visualize is you think of yourself like, looking out at the stars. And if you're pointing in a direction. And if you're pointing at 2 different stars in the same constellation, right, you're pointing probably mostly in the same direction. That's the idea, is like, okay, I can point at this star or I can point at this star, but they're so close I can just say, yeah, they're probably the same constellation. That's the idea of that multidimensional. And you're just
I
doing it
love
in like
that.
many, many dimensions. But that's what you're doing, really. You're like, oh, I'm pointing at this star. You're like, well, you could be also, it's kind of related to this other star over here that's also in that constellation. Let me tell you about that one as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's how I
I
think about
really
it.
like that,
It's a
James.
simple way to
I
think.
used to do, yeah, I describe it sometimes as if you could have a futuristic 3D globe
Mm,
with a little pin arrow showing this is John, right? And I said, well, where's James? And it shows the distance vector to where James is in Cincinnati, right? Or something like, show me where everyone I went to my graduating high school class is right now on Earth. And there's going to be some lines that are really far away. Some are going to be small. There might be clusters of people in big cities.
right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then our relationship to those lines, right? And all these are, James, what James and I are trying to describe to you humans out there listening is ways to, so in networking, we have the OSI model, right? That's not a real thing. That's an ephemeral, that's just a model for us humans to picture what it looks like when a packet gets onto a wire and goes to your computer and traverses up into an application,
Hmm.
right? So I think we need mental models to help us sort of like a 3D vector. We're talking about some pretty complex science here, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And did the jump from 3D to 4, 5, 6, and that's where the mind goes, okay, I just can't keep up with this anymore. I'm a flatlander. I can't, I can't think about those multi dimensions. Okay.
Right.
All right. So, you said we're talking about RAG, and that's what I've seen the pattern, as you already pointed out, like this letting LLMs take over. The chunking was always like black magic. It was like, oh, 500 characters, but 501 works better somehow magically, and that was so annoying. But I love the idea of letting the LLM take over chunking. The other part, I think, where we're kind of flipping the script on RAG, or at least where I kind of started doing it, and I know a lot of people are doing it, but I've heard of it referred to as agentic RAG. So you kind of just give the vector store to the LLM and say, you go look up the things. Because traditional RAG was,
Oh.
there was a prompt. I embed the prompt that the user typed, and then I get the stuff out of my vector store, and then I feed all that to the LLM. Instead, I would say take the prompt to the LLM and then tell the LLM, hey, you have the ability to do a vector-based search for semantically similar stuff. Come back and ask for the things yourself. And it knows how to take out all the garbage that doesn't need to be in the prompt that could clutter it up and make
Right.
for a not as rich
That is
signal.
a
Yeah.
brilliant approach. I
Yeah.
really excited. That sounds really neat.
That's been very effective because it takes out, if I type in blah, 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 a bunch of stuff, the LLM's smart enough to say, okay, this is not signal. This is not signal. Get all these words out. This is the rich stuff that you just asked about. Let me just take that and then create a vector out of that and then go do the search based on that. And it's much better at doing it that way when you kind of flip the script. So I love that idea of kind of agentic RAG. It does help improve the effectiveness of it. But as you pointed out, not a lot of people are doing RAG these days. But how I do that is with an MCP server. So let's maybe dive into MCP because I just see that being kind of a big topic these days. What even is this whole MCP thing?
Yeah, so I've completely fallen in love with Model Context Protocol (MCP) and how I've described it. And typically, I'm speaking to a network audience, but say it backwards. Honestly, say it backwards. It's a protocol.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's stop there. What is email? It's SMTP, right? Email is a protocol. It's client server. You have someone send, someone receive. It's got a set of grounded rules, specific port numbers, port 25. It depends on the email you're using. Could be POP. It could be a different port. Okay, what about HTTP? Hypertext. Right now, you and I are having a webcast over the web, over the World Wide Web, over a protocol. So protocol, we all understand protocols. So keep going backwards. It's context. So context is, right, this is a podcast between two people speaking in the technology field about artificial intelligence, right? I think everyone grasps context. Now, we have these windows that we can fill with context that we then send to the model, right? So we've just set it backwards. It's a protocol that governs the rules between providing context to models, right? Now, what I love about it, much like email, so James, do you have to use Outlook to send email?
I don't use Outlook to
Oh,
send email.
oh, right. Or do
Yeah,
you have to use Firefox to visit CNN.com?
right. Exactly.
No, these are for humanity. They're universal, they're open, they are protocols that any vendor, any developer, any single human can do what they want with, provided they follow the rules of that protocol, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So that's the way I try to equate it to people. Now, some people have challenged and said, you really think this is as big as email or as the World Wide Web? And I say, yes, I think it deserves a place in the pantheon
Mhm.
of protocols. Now, not every protocol pans out, right? There are protocols that are dead and deprecated and not really, used anymore, or they're supplicated with a better protocol. More often, it evolves into a better version of HTTPS, right? So, Model Context Protocol allows me to take any agent, and I'm going to use that broad and loosely. I think Copilot in VS Code is an agent. I think Claude Desktop is an agent. I think Anti-Gravity, the actual, the IDE is an agent. My own Python agent that I write from scratch with maybe the ADK from Google. Well, now I can, like a USB-C key, the way they describe MCPs, I can take, let's say, the NetBox MCP, plug it into my agent, and now my agent has access to those tools.
Mhm.
So MCP's client server, if James is the server, the MCP server NetBox, John is the agent, and I plug James in, and I go, James, what are your capabilities as a human? Like, it's nice to meet you. What are you good at? What skills do you have? What tools do you have disposal to? It's just like that. So I plug the NetBox in, and the NetBox server says, hey, client, here are 3 read-only tools that you can use to talk to NetBox using this server. And now when I say to my agent, how many sites do I have in NetBox in New York City? It says, oh, wait a second. I have a tool that I can use to call that NetBox to get the data back to answer this question. So it's RAG in a way, but RAG without the vector store. I'm not storing that. There's no intermediate between NetBox and the user or the agent now. It's not like I have to take that JSON from NetBox, put it in Chroma with embeddings, and then do the semantic lookup. It's a JSON RPC2,
Hmm.
which is a transport mechanism, everyone. This is just transporting the data in structured format. And then the LLM, the copilot says, oh, here's a table of your 13 netbox sites in netbox. And it makes a CSV table format from the data. I didn't write any Python, didn't write any JavaScript. I didn't have to make like a curl or a REST API call. I didn't click anything in a browser. I didn't go to some portal and click this and click that and click this. I just asked James, how many sites do I have in New York City? Now, there's 18,000 or like we're talking about tens of thousands of MCPs being available now. Every major player, every major vendor, every major
Everyone.
platform, right? Like if we had this discussion a year ago, it would be very like, do we think this is going to turn out? A year and a half later, I think we're all sort of going, wow, did that ever turn out well? This
Yeah.
protocol, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm with you. I've fallen in love with MCP. I've written an MCP framework, so I'm very familiar. I love what you said about the introspection to go to the MCP server and say, "Tell me about the tools." I think the new art where people are going to have to get good at doing it is that tool description, making the description of those tools and what parameters they accept and all of that stuff friendly to an LLM. That's going to be like the magic sauce that people need to learn now is how do I describe these tools and these capabilities. I don't call them capabilities because tools kind of an implementation, but it's basically it's a capability. What capability does this other agent or this other system have that the LLM can leverage? And for a long time we've all been talking about we're going to build all these multi-agentic systems. It really feels like we're going to settle on for a lot of use cases. It's provide the right tools to a core LLM and then let it talk to those tools and do its thing. Because I don't have to code up the planning and all that. Those core LLMs, those foundational models are really good at planning now. They know how to do all that chain of thought reasoning and all that. Just providing the tools, like you said, go get that context if it needs it. Tell me about the ports that are open. Tell me about this stuff and then let it drive the workflow itself. For a lot of cases, I think that's going to be like that's perfect. It's a perfect solution for the sort of it's going to be for. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm so I'm very bullish on it because anyone can do it, right? In the
Yeah.
networking world, for the past 10 years, network engineers have been told learn Python or die,
Hmm.
right? That netbox MCP I just described has extremely high value in the networking world. Zero coding uh, knowledge required. Yes, there's a little JSON, and yes, there's a little bit of friction there to get it installed. But if you can get over that hurdle, it's not like you have to take a community college course in Python to keep up with the skills of network automation to keep your job. It's all natural language, and you can use that awesome domain specific knowledge you have. The other thing, James, do you feel it's sounded like the periodic table or like the way these compound? Like when I take the Netbox MCP, that's one thing. But when I add the ServiceNow MCP and John's Network Automation MCP and a subnet calculator MCP and a security MCP, right? We make these agents extremely capable, like junior, senior network engineer capable, because we're just snapping in the tools they need, right? Um, the context windows respected with these tools. So with our Itential platform, with the flow agents that we can build, you're actually surgically selecting the skills and tools you want. You're not just binding all 30 tools from the MCP, because then we start to get into tool hallucination. We kind of kicking the can down the road. Where,
Yeah.
okay, now I've plugged in 100 MCPs and my agents discovered 300 tools. That introduces a problem
Oh
sometimes,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, it can get confused, just like with a long context. By the time it gets done generating and reading the entire context, it's like, okay, what did I read the first 1,000 characters? I don't know, or tokens, whatever. The same thing with tools. It can get overloaded with tools and it can get confused. And then again, like you said, it can hallucinate. Oh yeah, there's a tool that does, this. And it's like, no, that wasn't in the list. But
Right.
you've gone through 300 tools and now you've gotten yourself
Uh,
confused. Yeah.
right. But I think it should reflect the human org chart,
Hmm.
like I don't go to the dentist to get my shoes fixed, right? So I think
Yeah. Yeah.
agents, I think should have purpose and meaning. And like, that is my security agent. That is my network config agent. That is my network testing agent. They got their own, and then they have, much better context. We keep coming back to context, but the markdown files, the skills, the constitution files, the soul files, right? These agents can take on those personas, and you really don't want a universal, well, that's John's agent and it does everything John wants it to do. I think we need to be very careful and organize these much like an org chart.
Yeah, I think what the way it's evolving. I think some people are doing this. If I remember reading about this correctly, it's kind of evolving like a RAG situation again. It's almost like it's turtles all the way down, right?
Yeah,
So
right,
we
right,
have
right.
tools, and the description of the tools that gets put into a vector store.
Put
And then when I
into
say I want to do something to limit my tool space, I go to that vector store and say, give me some tools that could do this thing. And then it does the whole vector, calculation and embedding of the thing you want to do. And it looks up the tools based on what's relevant to you. And then that helps you kind of limit that bloat, that tool bloat. So, and then it's funny, something's going to get built on top of that
on top of that. I
later.
know, I know. You're so right. You're so right. I find myself doing that when I'm building. This might actually be a decent opportunity. Have you started doing spec-driven development, James? Are you using the spec kit and specs and markdown files?
I do. I've been doing a lot of stuff with. Yes, the way I do it though is I've been doing this kind of Ralph loop thing for the last month or so. So
Yes.
yes, I create the specs and I let Ralph kind of crank through those things. I'm learning a lot about how to most effectively use kind of a Ralph loop mechanism. I find I can be tremendously productive, but I also need to I need to slow myself down. I need to say, okay, hold on. Yes, we can do like 1,000 submodules in one go, and I can just go off to the grocery store and let Ralph crank through things.
Right, right.
But he often goes off in a direction too far. You kind of have to pace yourself, I think. But yeah, I love Spectrum. It used to be called spec-driven development with spec files for testing. But now we're getting into this the LLM is smart enough to say, let me just write all these things down that we've been talking about. So now I have a plan that I can keep myself on course. That is tremendously effective. Yeah, I love the spec-driven development.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so good to hear. I feel the same way. I haven't written proper code, probably in 3 months now. Honestly, I focus on my specs, and if the code doesn't work, I don't go to the code. I go to the spec and refactor the spec.
Hmm.
So it's just a different modus of operandi. Like I like this. I like that I get 2,000 lines of Python, let's say, but I also get 2,000 lines of Markdown, and it's all tested and it's all documented, and other people can figure out why I built it, how I built it, what was tested, what the user stories were, what the pass criteria were. It's all there, right? So it makes collaboration a lot easier. And I like that idea of AFK coding, away from keyboard coding, where, okay, Ralph, I'm heading to bed. The next time you see me, I'll have a coffee in my hand at 8 in the
Yeah.
morning. Don't make any assumptions because I'm not going to be here watching your work. So when I see you next, I'd like to see a recap of what you've done, the test case results,
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Ralph coding. I love that AFK coding.
Yeah. I think that is going to be, I've said this to other people, that's going to be the superpower of the future, right? Being able to keep these agents, all those plates spinning, right? So that's going to be the superpower. But being able to do it effectively. It's one thing to say, oh, I can token max and I can spend all these tokens. Sure. Yeah, you can, but are you just spitting out a bunch of garbage, or are you able to actually produce things that are meaningful and clean and all of that sort of stuff? One of the things I started doing recently within the past week was, okay, I'll kick off Ralph, and then I have my main Claude code session, but I've got Ralph running in another window, and then
Yeah.
I'll have Claude. I'll say, all right, I'm going to bed, like you said. Keep an eye on Ralph for me. And if he starts to do anything squirrely, put in new specs to the queue and rewrite the
Right.
queue and keep him on track for me. And okay, I got it. Good night. And it'll
That's
say,
brilliant. Well, I wrote this NetClaw, an OpenClaw NetClaw, and in my skills, I was reading how to optimize these things, or just out there ideas with OpenClaws and NetClaws and agents in general. So I have in my constitution for NetClaw to try to self improve
Mhm.
after every interaction.
Yeah.
And it is updating its own markdown files now at the end of a user session. It goes, okay, well, this is what worked. Here's
Mhm.
what didn't. I better introspectively update my soul file to explain that, this is a non-valid IPv6 address or whatever the
Yeah.
situation is.
Yeah.
So it's actually learning
Yeah.
and evolving, which is kind of scary, right?
It's not, it's, I'm going to use a movie reference, and this one might be one that nobody knows, but It reminds me of the movie Memento. You remember the movie Memento? So the guy has
Absolutely.
no long-term memory, right? And so what he would have to do in order to like navigate his life was write little things down. He would tattoo them on his arm about very important things like, "Oh, Sally is very important to me." You know, those sort. That's what these things are doing. You're putting it down in a markdown file. This is this Memento thing. And so it wakes up like it's never lived before or whatever, or no 51st dates again, and it looks around at its all of its tattoos and says, "Oh, okay, Sally's important. So if I see somebody named Sally, I should pay attention to
That
her."
is so brilliant. I
Yeah,
love that memento analogy. I'm going to be taking that. I
yeah,
love
no
that.
worries. But that's what it feels like, right? It has to
Yeah. Oh,
write these things down
absolutely.
because it can't remember session to session. It has to write things down, like the movie Memento. To me, I'm a movie guy, so I always use movie analogies for
I
things.
love it.
Claude, tattoo this on your forearm is what in the chat for the thing here. That's funny.
Since you're a movie guy, I have tied in the Twilio MCP into my agent.
Okay.
And when there was a network problem, it phoned me and told me in natural human language there was a problem over my phone. Did you remember the Lawnmower Man? And its goal was to make every phone ring on Earth at the same time. And the creepy ending where they pan out and
Yeah.
you hear a phone ring and then they zoom out and all the phones are ringing.
Oh man, Lawnmower Man. That's a deep cut right there. That's a lot of people don't remember that one. That was a great movie for
Go
virtual
check out the
reality.
Lawnmower Man. It had the early 90s VR effects looking
Yeah.
things. You
Yeah.
remember?
That was so great. That was like, remember when like Max Headroom was on TV
Yes.
a lot and Lawnmower Man was coming out and we were big into VR. That was one of those, like you said, like protocols and things that come and go. Like VR was huge. But I mean, Lawnmower Man was a blockbuster movie. And like, we all thought we were going to be living in these virtual world like Tron and
Yeah.
all of that. Like,
I know. I
it never
know.
really came to be. It still
Well, look
isn't.
at the metaverse, right?
Yeah,
They put
metaverse.
billions into the metaverse and like that,
Yeah.
and everyone goes, it's like the 3D TVs. We had 3D TV
Oh,
for a
yeah.
while,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something about humans want to put something over our eyes and not have to look at this world, right?
And it's funny. Like we push the envelope and then we're like, yeah, no, I don't like that. I don't
I
know
get a
about that's
headache. It doesn't feel right. I get
that's
nauseous.
yeah, yeah. And then
I
we
find I
never
get
have
a little
settled.
vertigo if I try those things for a while and then you come back to the real world.
Oh
There's
yeah.
this kind of a weird,
It
uh,
does. It gives you a headache, and it's like when you're on a treadmill and you get off and you're walking. You're like, well, it's like you have to learn to walk again. It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
the same sort of thing. I don't know. I'm with you on that. I think we were kind of uneasy by that. And my theory is, it's like it's built into our brains because if we get into this world of like, oh, you can live in a virtualized world, then we're going to realize we're already in one, and we're
Yeah.
programmed not to be able,
I'm so
feel
glad you went
uneasy.
there because that's where my mind goes. It's like it's one too many levels of inception for
Yeah.
us, right? You can't have a digital reality within the digital reality. That's
Yeah.
a no-go,
We're
right? So they
supposed to
make it
feel uneasy
feel
about that. Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
something about the
yeah. I
matrix
think you're
protecting
right.
itself.
It's like a guardrail. It's one
Yeah,
of the guardrails we're tripping.
yeah, exactly. We're getting up against that. Yeah. That's fantastic. Oh man. All right. You did mention OpenClaw, and I wanted to talk to you about this because you're kind of a network guy, so you're big on security, and well, not a kind of, you are big on security, and so OpenClaw. I was surprised to hear you kind of mention that. That seems like a lot of people are scared of OpenClaw, and I know there's already been some little kerfluffles with it, people being not so nice actors in this world. What is your take on OpenClaw? Are you playing around with it a
Well,
lot?
so I made this NetClaw. It has almost 500 stars on GitHub in like 2 months. Everyone is losing their minds over this NetClaw because you can talk to your network through Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever, right? Telegraph, excuse me, or whatever the OpenClaw toolkit is, right? All of that extended to network skills and network MCPs. Now, on the security thing and the production thing, some people were pushing me or asking me, I'd love to use this in production, but management's really, not on board because it's OpenClaw based. So there's two things that I've done to maybe help alleviate that. One is it's concentric rings. So one is something NVIDIA, you've heard NVIDIA's Nemo Claw.
Hmm.
You heard of this?
Yeah.
So NVIDIA came out with their own claw, but what it ships with is something called OpenShell. And OpenShell is a sandboxing environment for OpenClaws. So effectively, instead of running your OpenClaw on your raw bare metal, it runs inside of a Docker container which means it's isolated in the namespace and the URLs and the network paths and even the file system that it has access to. So some of those concerns go away right away. I don't want some OpenClaw having access to my employee's root C drive, right? Or the map drives or the namespaces or whatever. So instead, we sandbox it, and then we have a blacklist. It's only allowed to talk to this LLM, or only allowed to consume these services in a YAML file. So I love that. I've added that to NetClaw. And then Cisco, which is really neat of Cisco, released something called Defense Claw that you
Nice.
can wire up as a proxy for your OpenClaw to go through. And Defense Claw examines, think of it as a firewall for your OpenClaw. Every context window, every MCP, every interaction is scanned for security and for family friendliness, etc. You get to, you can tune it. So now I have 3 layers. I've got my NetClaw, which I've tried to make sure is secure. I've run the MCP scanners. Everything scans clean. So if you were to take my NetClaw and run it through some security scanners, it should pass the MCP scan and
Gotcha.
the skills tool. Defense Claw gives you a scanner, by the way, James. So if you're uneasy, if you ever see a skill or an MCP that you want to use, but you're not sure, you can run Defense Claw and scan those skills. And now most of my skills were coming back with a warning that the license wasn't specified, which I thought was interesting. I learned something that you can actually add the Apache license to your skill or your MCP. So when OpenClaw scans it, it understands the license structure. So, I vibe coded and said, okay, we'll fix that. Go ahead and apply Apache 2 to all of my MCPs. And now the MCP defense clause scans them as clean. So
Nice.
there is, we talked about MCP quite a bit. And I know the joke is longstanding, the S in MCP stands for security, right? Um, it drives me up a wall because it's such a good protocol. It is so good. And I don't see it as insecure. Yes, it can be written. I can make a malicious MCP. I can make a malicious a lot of things, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's insecure by default, right? So these new tools, and I'm glad the industry is responding, Cisco and NVIDIA, to shore up the security because they see the value, let's say, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the MCP, there's going to be a bit of a, I don't know if it's so much of a reckoning, but one thing that I built into my framework, and if you look at the spec from last year, the November spec, it does specify if you're going to do, it should be it should be a resource server. It should, OAuth 2, and here's how you describe your
Right.
endpoint, and here's how you describe the resource that you're providing, and all these things have to match. There's a lot in there that, to prevent DNS rebind and all of those that's built into the spec now. It is mentioned. Now, it's not like, if you ain't doing this, you ain't doing MCP. It's not like that yet. It may do this or it should do this. It's not, the language hasn't quite been clamped down to say you must do this. So we'll see. But I think you're right. It's not a huge leap for people. And I think most people that were saying they were at least putting API keys in front of these things. They weren't just unfettered, like, oh, it's out the public internet, go manage my bank account and put it out on the, the World Wide Web. Most people were putting some form of authentication and authorization in front of these things anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's one thing I just wish the security analysts would be a little bit more careful with the way they paint their brush, right?
Yes.
Like there's some nuance here. We can't just go a whole so theoretically it's the most insecure thing ever and it could take over your root and destroy your file system. That's one thing, theoretically. Practically speaking, of the tens of millions of these things running on Earth right now, how many of them are really doing damage or doing bad things? It wouldn't take off. It wouldn't have that many stars. You know, I just feel like there's this punditry around AI tools of people that don't use the tools, but they feel very opinionated about why others shouldn't use the tools.
I don't know. I think the industry, I think we need some of the, it's a balance, right? So you need some of
Yeah,
that punditry. You need some of those kind of negative people, the sky is falling people, to point out areas for improvement, areas for growth. If you
there
think
we
about it a
go.
little more
There we go.
positively, it's like MCP doesn't have a security specification built in. They'd forget to add the word yet. to the end of that sentence. It's like, oh, it can never be changed. What are you talking about? There's been all kinds of releases of the MCP spec. Like we can add new things. We can modify it and evolve it over time. Like HTTP, how many, like you said earlier, how many versions of HTTP are we on now, right? We
Right,
went from
right.
1 to 1.1 to 2 to, like we fix things over time.
And
So
you
I
know
think we
what?
need some adversarialness built in, but that's to help it grow.
I agree, and I agree with you. Let's not stop there. That's my criticism of MCP. Let's go the step further and say, here are my proposals to make it better. Because there are people that know security much better than I do and then network people do. And right, like there are sophisticated security folks out there that maybe could improve this if they would just, be more willing to share the antidote to the poison, right, that they've found.
I think looking at this and reading the spec and the evolution of the spec over time, I think they did not do themselves. I don't understand why they went this direction, but the very early on MCP, everything was standard IO transport. So people were running servers on their own machine. So it was it's pretty easy to control. If you want the thing running on your machine, you run it. And then you say connect to it with standard IO. So it's a very localized thing. But with that, you assume, oh, I want the MCP server to have access to my file system roots so it can scan files and read in files whenever it wants. That's a horrible idea over
That is a pretty bad
HTTP
idea.
streamable transport. Like that's a stupid idea. So I think that them starting with that standard IO local, which who was going to do that? No mom and pop is going to run an MCP server on their Windows box, or their iPad. It needed to be web oriented from the get go, the HTTP oriented. That was just in my
Yeah,
opinion, that
jump
was
right to the
very short sighted.
streamable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
I would
should have
agree with
been
that.
streamable HTTP based from the get go. That standard IO stuff, that was just, I think it's just mumbo jumbo. And I think they should have just had it be in two different specs because it just
I
messes it up
remember
because everybody
seeing
thinks
that
it.
standard IO and I kind of went like C++ standard IO, like I have access to a root.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting, right?
yeah, yeah. And I when I first started messing around with MCP, I'm like, this isn't going anywhere. I'm not doing that. I'm not running things on my machine. Are you kidding me? That's dumb.
And then some early days was like, well, I guess I could run it in the container and then
Yeah,
expose Studio that way locally. Maybe that's a little more secure. I don't know.
yeah,
The other thing that didn't do them any favors was that, at least for me in the networking world, right, the IEEE is the group that puts out protocol standards,
yeah,
not Anthropic.
right.
Right? It's not some startup who's got vested interest that comes out with protocols. Who the heck do they think they are, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be great if we could start getting these into these standards bodies and stuff and make sure that they're.
But they did donate it to the Linux Foundation, though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they did try to make an improvement there. So I'm excited. Is it time to ship it or skip it?
It is time to ship it or skip it.
Ship or skip. Everybody, we gotta tell us if you ship or skip.
And this is always a very exciting part of the show. I think you're very familiar. It's kind of our hot or not, our take on hot or not here on the / First topic. There's been a lot of talk about this, and it's near and dear to my heart because I'm a software engineer and I love doing this. But there's all this, as you said, doom and gloom about all these AI, these layoffs, and they're AI oriented, and the industry's dead, and all this stuff. Where are you at on that?
Right now, so I'm at a skip it. I would skip that. I would look a little deeper. There is a lot of instability, let's say, politically, socioeconomically. There's a lot going on in the world, around the world. Even, and I hate to bring up political stuff, but like the impact of tariffs. I think the impact of tariffs and the instability on Wall Street, has led to these layoffs, the instability in the market itself, right? I don't think that AI is actually, I think it's a window dressing. I think it's a smokescreen. I think if it lets them save face because, no, look, all this we're doing, our AI is so good, we don't need this many people left, 30,000 employees. We're offsetting that with artificial intelligence. It makes for a good story, but do they, okay, so where's the follow-up story to show the 5,000 agents and how they've been built and how they're using them? And there's no follow-up. There's no meat on the bone there. It's all sizzle,
Yeah.
right? There's no steak.
Yeah.
Because I'm in the industry and I'm working and No one has large scale agent rollouts, um, other than maybe some of the hyperscalers, right? And I was reading something like some of the space agencies. They are heavy into artificial intelligence, as you can imagine, but they have augmented their staff. Like I see AI augmenting existing staff, not displacing staff in the short to mid term. I don't think the AI is good enough. I don't think enough time has been, MCP is only 18 months old. True agentic AI with reasoning capability and tool calling is only a few months old. I know we move fast as humans, but honestly, James, we haven't moved so fast that we can lay off, 8% of our workforce just because AI is here, right?
Yeah, we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, and you're right. It's the companies who are doing it. There's a couple of mindsets I've seen in the interwebs about this, and one person pointed out, pay attention to the companies who are doing the layoff and saying AI is taking over. They kind of have a vested interest in AI being sold. They're selling AI things, so there's a lot of that. I think. I think there's also, I mean, let's just face it. I mean, anytime you're going to see efficiency gains, the CFOs of the world are going to be like, ooh, this is fantastic. We can save money. So they're going to do it. I think what's going to happen is that's short-sighted. That's ill-advised, in my opinion. I think I wrote an article about this from an economic standpoint. Q is your output, right? So Q is how much you can output. Why fix Q, your output, and then you lower you make your efficiency better, so you lower your cost of maintaining that same Q? Why not raise Q? Why not improve your output? And I think that's going to be the companies that we're reading about in 100 years that are still around, or in the 50 years or whatever. Those are the ones that have said, oh my goodness, you're telling me that with all the people we have here right now, we can do 10 times as much? Let's do that instead of like,
Right,
you mean with a tenth of our people, we can continue to status quo? Like that
right.
short
I think
sightedness
it's
is going to bite some of these people, it's going to be unfortunate because I think there's going to be a temporary dip in the market for software engineers and for just AI in general. There's going to be a dip of talent because people are going to shy away because of these short-sighted decisions, and there's going to be a bit of a resurgence later. We do this all the time. We hyper swing the pendulum back and forth.
No, I think it has some impact on the decision to look at the workforce. I just don't think I think we need I think more clarity around when they say 30,000 Microsoft employees have been offered early retirement. Um, I don't think that's just coders and programmers. Microsoft is an enormous company, and yes, AI is. I hear it through the market. I just got back from Google Next, and some of the Google leadership is saying, their instructions to their teams is not to write code anymore. It's to do what we've been talking about this entire conversation, using specs, using Markdown, using agents. But they're not saying we don't need you anymore. They're saying we need you to do something differently, right? We need you to do something a little differently.
Yeah, I think there was an article about, I believe it was IBM. I'm pretty sure they kind of flipped it a little bit. Everybody's like, "Oh, we can fire all our juniors. We don't ever have to hire juniors again." They were like, "They're zigging when people are zagging." They're like, "No, we're hiring the juniors and we're teaching them to grow up in this world to be able to be effective. They're investing in those juniors." I know the guy from Google is the one who said it was the dumbest idea ever to fire all the juniors and not have to hire juniors. Like it was a
Yeah,
more colorful language than that. It
right,
had an F
right.
bomb mixed in, but
Uh,
that was the gist of it. Is like this is so just stupid. It's dumb. You don't want to do that. I think that it'll heal over time. I do worry about the short-sighted impact on our industry, and those folks who are making those short-sighted decisions, they're going to lag behind because other people who are they're just stomping on the gas pedal instead of like, oh, let's just keep our gas pedal where it is. Our gas is just a tenth cheaper, right? Like they're like, oh, let's
uh,
slam on the
I
gas.
and I think we all need to be honest. I don't think the quality of the models was there 2 years ago to say we're going to let go of people that use AI to do the job. It's only become very, very capable in the last 6 to 8 months.
And I don't even think
It was decent. It was a fun toy before that, and it had promise before that, but only now when we get into the like GPT 5.5 model is out. That is 2 grades above 3.5, right? They finally made it to 5.5. And I mean, if you're not using these things though, you should be worried.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I don't want to let people off the hook here when I say that I don't think the layoffs are related to AI directly. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be paying attention
Yeah,
and getting your
absolutely.
AI skills together, right?
You think of like the book Good to Great. Everybody's like everybody looks for that like flash in the pan moment. There was like, oh, we did this one thing and it was like, oh my goodness, it was amazing, and we became a billion-dollar company. Well, I think when it comes to AI, I don't think there was one thing. I think there was a bunch of little things building up over time. I think we're going to look back in the history of the evolution of this agentic AI and generative AI. December of 2025 to me seemed like there's something changed. And it's right around that time. I think it was December, maybe November, but it was very late in 2025. Something changed, as you said, last 6 months. Everybody's kind of experienced it and they're saying it, but I don't know that anybody's never identified exactly what changed. And I don't know that there is one thing. I think it's
Like
just
Claude
everything
Code
floating up.
seems to have captured the zeitgeist,
Yeah.
right? Claude Code seems to have been that, and along with the Claude, the 5.4 model, I think it is that they came out with, the Sonnet model.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of, anyway, there's a lot of moving parts, but I even feel it in the social acceptability.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it used to be slop. I don't read slop very much anymore. I don't hear people, even vibe coding. We just call it coding now.
Yeah.
Everybody does it
That's
this
just
way.
how we code now. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So you hinted at it. One of our topics for the ship it or skip it. If I've been kind of a Luddite, and I'm like, this AI thing, it's going to pass. I don't know. I don't feel like this is going to be a thing. We've talked about AI in the past. It's happened twice through history. Big to do. And then, we go through an AI winter. So if I was been a naysayer so far, and now I'm coming to the realization, oh my goodness, I was wrong. Like I'm in trouble. Can I catch up? Am I able to catch up? Should people still try to catch that train?
So I would say ship it. You can catch up. I would suggest the train has left the station, and you're going to have to jog, maybe even hard sprint a little bit to catch the back of the train, but it's still in sight of the station. So let's work backwards, right? Spec-driven development, 6 to 7 months old since GitHub released the spec kit. So that's just a few months old. MCP, we've talked about it. It's revolutionized many people's lives in the industry at large. It's less than 2 years old. RAG, 2.5, 3 years old. GPT 3.5 is November of 2022. So how far behind could you be on something that holistically is less than 5 years old? The difference is, though, instead of like James and I, where RAG came at us and we spent some time doing RAG, and then Raptor trees, and then Graph RAG, and then Agentic RAG. And then we moved into MCP, and it was local MCPs for us. And then it became streamable MCPs. And then we built our own MCPs. And then we started building our own agents to consume these MCPs. These things came at us linearly. Right now, if you're just listening and you've woken up to the music or you're smelling the roses, it's all going to come at you at once, all of this stuff, right? So that may feel like it's insurmountable because there's such a 4 years of stuff being thrown at you at once. But if you use AI, give me a learning path for 1 hour a day to bring me up to speed on AI, and listen to what James and I have talked about. Put the technologies in order that we encountered them, and use AI. I use AI to help me do AI all the time. I don't even know where it starts. James has already said turtles all the way down. When I write a spec-driven development, I'm using AI to help me build the specs. Then I then use the AI to develop the specs to deliver the spec. It's hard to believe where we stop and where we end, and where humans and AI and where the blend, but get into the flow, everyone. You have to get there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not too late, and I think honestly, like I think you alluded to it. You're actually at an advantage to people like me and you, John, that we had to go through kind of the evolutionary phases. We had to look like cavemen for a little while and then stand a little farther, taller and taller and taller. They had the luxury of like showing up as, Homo sapiens standing upright, with all your teeth and whatnot, and being able to learn. And I think we're just there's so much out there to help you learn right now. The information, there's a rich set of information now, whereas the past 4 years has been like just clawing at things and trying to learn this stuff and tinker and all that. I think you can learn and catch up much faster than the last 4 years. So don't feel like it's not going to be a slog. You can get productive. You can get, up to speed very, very quickly these days. I'm with you on ship it.
And James, you've learned in your life, you've done harder things than this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like, it's not spanning tree, it's not routing, it's not a CCIE, it's not like, I just want people to understand that once you start doing it, you're going to look back and go, wow, that wasn't so hard. I didn't have to become a computer scientist or a machine learning expert or be deep in algorithms. There's a lot of people who, AI is very loaded, James. There's a lot in the AI words and sphere, and I think some people are intimidated by it. They think they don't think that they have their own, that they're smart enough, let's say, to learn this. I would skip that, since we're in ship it and skip it. I would skip the idea that you're not smart enough to do this. You can do this. Anyone listening, I mean that. You listening right now, you can pick this up in a few weeks.
Yeah, it's funny how and I've talked about this before. I came up with a funny little name for it, but like the way this stuff made it into the market, like you had grandmas and grandpas talking to agentic AI and asking for like recipes, and like we talk about, why is the sky green or blue? Those sort of things. Like then before even like corporate CEOs were talking about it, like CTOs and CIOs, they weren't talking about it, but yet grandma and grandpa were exposed to it first. So I called it the Papaw paradox, right? Like this highly, highly technical stuff got in the hands of the consumers first, and then started making its way into businesses and those sort of things. So it's really kind of an interesting. I don't know. My experience has been usually those sort of things trickle the other way, right? Businesses are like, oh, let's latch onto this technology, and then it sort of makes its way out to the masses. It seems to be kind of an inverted thing. I don't know if there's any principle in economics or anything about that, but it's just my experience. That's not usually how these things go, and it's just fascinating to me that Papaw paradox exists. Like my grandpa was talking about, oh yeah, ChatGPT kind of thing, right? Like that's weird that they're talking about these advanced AI topics before we're even discussing them in organizations and the enterprise. So, all right. Well, that's it for Ship It or Skip It. We had a great Ship It or Skip It. That was some really meaty topics. The next segment, and again, we warned you during the prep call about this. This is the meat of the show. This is what everybody tunes in for. This is where the answers matter, right? Like you are going to be graded on your answers to these questions. Our third segment of the show is what we call our lightning round.
It's time for the lightning round. Rapid fire, don't slow down. Answer quick and make it count. In this game, there's no way out. It's time for the lightning round.
And again, I don't want to be lighthearted about this. This is where it gets serious. This is down to brass tacks. So however you want to say it, this like frame your brain that this is where things do matter. This is like Final Jeopardy. This is the meat of the show. I just want to make sure you're mentally prepared. Have you prepared yourself for the lightning round?
I've focused my breathing. I'm mindful of my camera. I'm trying to focus. Let's see how I do.
Yeah, and sometimes there's words in the questions that might be the question might be worded in such a way to kind of trip you up. Yeah, so there are trick questions, because these are very, very tricky questions. Sometimes, some of them, not all of them are like that. Some of them are very straightforward, but there's a lot of them that we're trying to trip you up because we want you to think hard and get to the right answer. First up, Taylor Swift is blank. Fill in the blank.
The best.
The best. Okay. Say a word in Spanish, please.
Haciendo.
Okay. How many times did you sneeze in the last 7 days?
12.
12. That's respectable.
I was in the desert heat of Las Vegas. It's probably closer to 15, but I think a dozen.
It feels right. I mean, What's your ideal outside temperature?
In Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Oh, you can do either one. We'll leave it up to the audience as an exercise to
So
the
for
audience
me,
to chat
I
GPT
like
their
a
way.
nice 24 degrees centigrade,
Okay.
24 around, not too hot, not too cold, short sleeves and shorts, but no sweat.
I gotcha. I like that. Okay. At least you're not doing Kelvin.
And I think that would be like 68 in
Oh,
Fahrenheit.
that's nice. That's very nice. Yeah. Okay, here's one. We've kind of been doing a little bit of a social experiment here on the / in the past few months, but there's this one question we've been kind of repeating. Do you like the smell of gasoline?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
To the point where I may accidentally get a little on my fingers when I pull the nozzle out.
Yeah. Yeah. And just get a little taste of it.
Just a touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And that's been the vast majority of people have said yes, they do
Really?
like the smell
Really?
of gasoline. It's one thing, like when you ask the question, some of the people have been like, it's almost like they were caught off guard by the question because they had to, you could see it in the moment because we do record this with video and you can see their face in the moment. They're like coming to the realization, oh, I do like the smell of gasoline.
Dude.
That's weird. And then it's like a introspective
Yeah, I
moment
want to
for
be
someone.
very respectful to anyone who's lost anyone in a gasoline fight. I know that those are, they occur and they happen. So I want to be respectful. I like the
Right.
smell of gas, but to anyone who's lost anyone in a gasoline fight, my condolences.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to be conscious of that. Yeah.
Well, they're frequent. The gasoline fight could break out at any moment.
Any moment. I mean, you never know. You just never know. And that's one thing I love about the / We talk about things that are real, to real people. And it's real questions. These are real topics. Like, what's your favorite clothing brand?
There's this French Canadian brand called Marco that makes nice stretch belt pants that I like. It's a big and tall brand named Marco out of the province of Quebec where I live.
So would you say that Ralph Lauren's polo was an answer to that? No, that's a really bad Marco polo.
I don't know about that's a really good joke that I almost lost. I almost lost that joke.
I had to explain it, so it was like, that's not a good joke if I had to explain it. Okay, yeah.
No, that was very layered, and I think on a repeat, people are going to see that joke go about 3 feet over my head at first.
I had a guest on that I did a movie quote, and they didn't get it, and I was so disappointed. I was like, man.
Hey, I dropped the lawnmower man on you, and you were like on that. So
yeah,
I'm really,
I
remember mad
that
respect to your movie skills. Yeah,
I saw that one in the theater. That was a great movie. Yeah. All right, so let's make sure we got to stay on topic. Again, hard hitting questions here, John. We want to stay focused. Which animal adds more joy to the world, squirrels or llamas?
It's funny. You would think the llama, I'm going to say the squirrel.
Okay.
You know why? Because a squirrel will never rear its head back and spit in your eye.
I've never seen one do it.
Now, squirrels maybe possess that capability to do so, but I've never seen it.
They've got the couth, as my grandma would say, not to. You know what I mean? They know better.
They're classy,
yeah,
right?
They're a classy animal. I appreciate that. Again, this is what we're here for on this / Are you a dark chocolate or a milk chocolate kind of guy?
Milk.
Milk chocolate?
Milk.
Okay. If there's a spider in your house, do you kill it or do you set it free?
I'm a catch and release.
Catch and release.
The mindset of catch and release, yeah. Now, that's because my spiders pose no risk to me.
Okay. You don't have
if it was like a black widow or whatever, something quite dangerous.
Yeah.
I think my position is soft on on catch and release.
If I'm with you. I'm on the catch and release train for sure. I think spiders are beneficial. They kill all the bugs that I don't want, but it also comes down to their level of cooperation of the release process and the safe capture and release. I'm only to a point. If they're not cooperating, you got to go. You know what I mean? Like you're just not going to make it.
Right. Now, if it was a large enough spider, there's a third option of just moving.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you got insurance, use it and just light it up, and be done with it. There's no reason to have to. Nobody should have to live like that. Life's too short to live with big
I think that
spiders.
should actually be a policy. You just attach the photo of the spider to the policy, and if it's within a certain size guidelines, yeah, they should just let you torch your house.
Yeah, I would ask for a jury of my peers or something. You know what I mean? In that case, because
Yeah.
nobody's gonna convict you. If you show them that kind of spider, they're not gonna. They're not sending you away to the pokey.
They
for that.
might thank you. And you
Yeah.
might actually be rewarded for that instead of punished.
Yeah, I live near that neighborhood. I'm glad you killed that thing. I
Thank
don't
you for
want it in
killing
my
that
house.
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
I've actually cut down a significant amount. So I'm only like 1 or 2. Now, when I'm at a Vegas convention type thing, the long days, the boardrooms and training, and, I could put a dozen back, but, 1 or 2 cups.
I think I would be wired for sound if I drank a dozen cups of coffee. I do drink bigger cups. So realistically, I probably drink about 4 with the cups, the size of cups that I drink.
Well,
But yeah,
I got to be careful when I'm in the United States. Everything is so much bigger, right? When they're like, do you want the 48 ounce or the large?
yeah. Would you like the gallon of coffee? Yeah,
How big is that large?
yeah.
Well, you want to pull your truck around the back. We'll start the pump.
I load this
We'll get the
thing
pump
up.
started. And by
Yeah,
the time you get back there, the pump will be ready.
We'll get the IV plugged in. You should be good to go for the day. Yeah, we'll put you on a drip. All right. We're going to do a final question here. This is for all the marbles. I like this one. I don't know if I've seen this question before. I have a list that I go through and it gets updated every now and then. This is a good one. All right. Would you rather come face to face with a miniature hippopotamus or a giant cockroach? Hold on, but there's more. Both are in a bad mood.
The mini hippo. Because I think I'd actually like to roll around with a mini hippo. It'd probably smush me and it has the upper hand in a fight. But I think I could win it over. I don't cockroaches, man. I lived in Toronto and I've experienced some cockroaches in my life. Even a small one is enough to take me out of the picture. But a small hippo, I think I could do it. I think I could do it.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like that inversion of role would play a part. So like a cockroach isn't, spend its life being small compared to humans. But if you gave it that big, like the movie Men in Black, it wanted to
Yes.
kill a bunch of people, right? Edgar,
Yeah.
wanted to kill everyone. And like, I think they'd have a chip on their shoulder. Whereas a hippo, they're honestly one of the most dangerous animals on Earth. They kill a lot of people, like the full size hippos. But if they became
Right.
miniaturized, they may be like, whoa, I don't have my superpowers anymore. Let me be nice.
I think there might be some irony though in being smushed with the shoe by a giant cockroach.
Yeah.
I think that would be a pretty ironic death, man,
Yeah.
smushed by a cockroach.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be an interesting twist.
Yeah.
So depending on the outcome, if the outcome is that I don't win either fight, I think I would rather lose the fight being smushed like on a shoe, like they
Quickly.
you know what I mean?
Make it quick. Yeah.
Well, there's a nice irony to it.
So like poetic justice
A
almost.
poetic way of, for all the cockroaches I've smushed in my time, for me to have the tables turned, I think that would be interesting.
It's a very self-aware answer. I like that. All
Well,
right.
James,
well,
I've had so much fun. I love this lightning round. That's great.
I love the lightning round. That's the most fun part of our show for me, because I get to be silly, and not that I'm not silly for the rest of the show. But in closing, anything you've got coming up? Any sort of are you writing a book? Are you speaking at a conference? Are you doing a one-man show on Broadway? Anything like that you have coming up that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I have this Thursday. I have a gasoline fight scheduled at the Sunoco at Cisco Live. Actually, there's going to be what's called the Vibe Ops Lounge. So Itential's got an extra booth for me for the whole week called the Vibe Ops Lounge. I have like 7 different sessions scheduled. I'll be talking. There'll be an Ask Me Anything. We'll do some vibe coding live, some spec-driven development. I'll look at some Itential code. It's going to be, so I'll be there all week in my booth. So if you need selfie stickers, you want to say, hey, you want to show me your NetCall implementation, it'd be a really great time for us to connect.
And this is, what's the
in
date
Las Vegas at Cisco Live, June 2nd to 6th, I think.
June 2nd to 6th. Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. That sounds really cool. I would like to try to get out there for that. I think it'd be a hoot to spend a day with you and tinker around with some vibe. What was the Vibe Lounge?
Vibe Ops Lounge.
Vibe Ops
So
Lounge.
we've got vibe coding. I'm trying to bring vibe operating.
Okay.
So that we can all become vibrators.
Yeah, it's like vibe operator, just mix it together. Okay, I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. I feel like maybe marketing would get maybe have a say on that. I don't know, or maybe there's a trademark infringement thing there. I don't know. I feel like that word's been used for something. Anyway. Well, this has been fantastic. This has been a lot of fun. Hope to have you on again, and anytime you're welcome to come back and hang out with us and talk through all things AI again. I would love to have that. How can folks get in touch with you if they'd like to get in touch with John Capobianco?
So LinkedIn's a great spot to get a hold of me. I'm still on Twitter X. I do have a YouTube channel as well. And please reach out. I'd love to connect with you. I really like to hear your story.
Yeah. Well, it has been so fun having you on. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
No, I had a really good time, James. I look forward to being back someday.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome anytime. And if you would like to get in touch with us here at the /, drop us a line at the/@calibrity.com. See you next time. The / podcast is created by Calibrity. The / team is director and producer Ryan Wilson, editing by Steve Baradelli, marketing support by Taylor Blessing, and I'm your host, James Carman. Thanks for listening.